Hi, guys. Thank you so much for listening to Threads Podcast. I just want to do a quick intro before our last podcast of the year. We've decided to take the last 2 weeks off of 2019, so this will be your last episode until January. First week of January, we'll have another episode released. I just want to take a time to wish you and your family a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that jazz. I know sometimes the holidays can be stressful, and I hope and pray that it's not for you and that you can enjoy time with family and there's not too much family drama. And again, we are just so grateful for all of our listeners and the fun that we've had with you guys. And hopefully you've learned some things and enjoyed our content. I'm just going to do one plug like I always do. Just share with a friend. If you have a friend that maybe just needs a distraction from the daily grind and wants a little bit something that's deeper and thought-provoking, please share our podcast with them. So again, I know it's just me recording it, but Ben is super grateful for you guys as well, and we can't wait to see what 2020 brings us. So enjoy the last episode. This episode is a topical episode about churches and taxes, so that can get a little sticky, so enjoy. Hi, guys. Welcome to Threads Podcast, Life Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to record today a specific topic that we're going to talk about. And we're not here for an agenda. We're not here for political. But Ben and I decided we wanted to change things up a little bit and not always talk about current events and things like that, but just hot topics like impeachment. Not just kidding.
We're not going there.
Just kidding.
Yet.
No, we're not going there.
We're not going there at all.
No, I don't like political talk.
Yes, this is true. So, Threads is just an opportunity for Jason, my co-host, and I, Ben, to talk about issues that are important to us, talk about issues that matter to our listeners, and really just embody what it means to be open, authentic, and honest with ourselves and each other. In a world of Facebook fake, where you see one thing on social media and quite, I wouldn't say all the time, but most of the time, people that are posting the happy moments are just either totally ignoring and living in denial of the stuff that's not so happy, or they're intentionally not showing it. So we want this to be a place where we can show who we are, warts and all, and, talk openly and honestly. And today that means diving into a topic that I will admit I kind of do have a dog in this fight just because of my career background. Like, this really hits home for me in a lot of ways more than our previous topical ones did. So, you want to introduce the topic, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I will. We're talking today about doctor-assisted suicide. So I know...
Wait, you said church and taxes. Oh, boy.
No. Oh, my bad.
We can stop and buffer. I mean, we can, but then my introduction means nothing.
No. Sorry. So we're going to talk today about churches and taxes.
We're so unfiltered. We're just going to leave that in there.
Yeah, who cares? I don't care.
Oh boy.
In my mind,
wrong topic.
So what we did, we picked two topics for our episodes, and then we were going to, if we ran out of time, we wouldn't do the second one. So I just assumed we were just going to go down the list. I'm an idiot.
Miscommunication.
It's my fault.
No, I didn't understand your thought process.
Yeah, well, so. I should probably think it out loud or talk it out loud so then you can understand. Okay, today on Threads Podcast, we're going to discuss churches and taxes, and I have not pre-read this. Did you add this today?
I just did while we were sitting here, and you asked me if that's what I was doing, and I said yes.
But that's not what I asked about. Where's my note that I wrote episode 2?
I changed it. We're just so good at communicating.
I swear I didn't write churches and taxes down.
You didn't.
Oh.
I bumped it down.
Okay.
I thought you were watching what I was doing.
F you didn't. Yeah, I was watching what you were doing, but I was also on Buzzsprout looking at stuff. Okay. So you should have said, Jason, let's do episode 2, churches and taxes. And then you would wait for me to say, okay.
Hey, Jason. Let's do episode 2, churches and taxes.
Sounds good.
All right, jumping right in. And I do have a dog in this fight because of my career background. I do not have a dog in the fight of Dr. Seuss's suicide.
In my head, I was like, okay, this is going to get real weird. But all right, let's go for it.
I just love how you didn't ask any questions. You just went right in.
Yep, I went right in. So I will let you present this then.
All right. So the issue of churches and taxes is one that really does matter to me in a lot of ways because my initial career was being employed at a church. So let me just sum it up. First of all, the first recorded tax exemption, any idea where that came from? I mean, you could read, but...
No, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, so the first recorded in history tax exemption that was given to churches was during the Roman Empire, when Constantine, emperor of Rome from 306 to 337, granted the Christian church a complete exemption from all forms of taxation following his conversion to Christianity in 312.
Okay, for us idiots, Bible idiots, is that AD or...
That's AD.
After death?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So
this kind of puts it in perspective where we're at.
Yes.
For 2019.
So it's been in place for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And America has embedded that into our DNA as far as taxation. So there are two camps on this issue. Two main camps. I'm sure there's others or mixtures of both, but there's those who are for churches being tax exempt, and then there are those who are against churches being tax exempt. So those who are for this issue argue that a tax exemption keeps the government out of church finances and upholds the separation of church and state. They say that churches deserve a tax break because they provide crucial social services, and that 200 years of church tax exemptions in the United States have not turned this country into a theocracy. So
that's like Christianese. I like that word.
Yeah, I know. So that's the for argument. However, there are those who are against this idea, and they say that opponents argue that giving churches special tax exemptions violates the separation of church and state, and that tax exemptions are a privilege, not a constitutional right. They say that in tough economic times, the government cannot afford what amounts to a subsidy worth billions of dollars every year.
Let's pause on that. Yeah, okay, so they stopped doing the taxes. We're already in debt. Like, who gives, like, that's really going to move the needle?
Yeah, we're billions when we're trillions in debt.
Yeah, so anyways, go ahead. I just was like, that's not going to move the needle.
I don't think so either. So, but here's where it gets a little fuzzy. The second part of the for argument was they say that churches deserve a tax break because they provide crucial social services. Not every church does. I really don't think every church does.
So what is the definition of social services? Does it have to do with money or just outreach to the community? Like, hey, we're going to go rake this old lady's leaves.
Yeah, I would say doing things that are a benefit to the community as a whole, not just a benefit to the people that go to that church.
So you feel like there's a lot of churches that don't do that community outreach?
Yes. I feel like there's a lot of churches that are very insulated and do their own thing, keep to themselves, and they don't really have a value for
outside the congregation.
Yeah, for being a lighthouse. Like it's like a social club or a country club.
But with that definition, if you're still helping your congregation, you're still providing social services to people that's
true.
According to the government, they don't look at that church separate. They look at those people in the church and out of church as the same. Just because you're in a church, I think you're still providing that social service.
Correct. But I guess then it boils down to what's your definition of church? And I think that's important too, because if you look back, if you want to go all the way back to that emperor of Rome that we talked about, I mean, you look in the book of Acts, which is all about the early church. The church was active in meeting people's needs. Like from the get-go, that's what church has been about. And I think a lot of churches in America have lost sight of that. And instead of meeting communities' needs, they're just meeting their own needs. And I feel like that's off kilter for what a church should be about.
I mean, I disagree a little bit because I think if they're helping the people in the church, then I think I agree with you that churches should do that. I mean,
Sure.
that's the whole point of Jesus, like
Yes.
helping others. But if you break it down to the social services like definition, I think they're providing that.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from.
You didn't think about that, did you, beforehand?
Of course not. This is why we're friends.
I know. That's why I love it. Not that I say I'm right. I'm just saying you could, looking at the spectrum of what the government says social services is, it could be providing that.
Yeah. So let me just ask you, do you feel like churches should be given an exemption?
Yeah, because I get an exemption, because I get a tax break.
Right.
No, I mean...
What if you didn't get a tax break? Would they still deserve a tax exemption?
I'm going to relate this to child support. You're like, where are you going with this?
No, I'm curious. Tell me.
I was divorced. I had Nolte really young at 19. I was 19 when she got pregnant, 20 when I had him. And then we married and we got divorced and then child support. So I paid $400 a month for a long time and happy to pay it, never missed.
Wow.
And
awesome.
Well, it helps when your employer takes it out of your check.
Well, yeah.
So I got a pay raise when he turned 18. But there's no rules or regulations for that money. So it goes to the government. They send it to my ex. She can spend it on booze and cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, okay, how did I get here? How did I get here?
We're talking about whether you feel like the church deserves an exemption.
So if they get the exemption, what are they doing with that money that they're saving?
Yeah.
There is I need to know that they're spending it on, am I okay that they spend it on payroll? Am I okay that they spend it on outreach? Like,
yes.
I feel like, and maybe that's available. I don't know. I don't go to my church board meetings, but
sure.
I think if you're going to get a tax break, you should have someone should have a say on where the money goes.
Yes.
A long story to get to that. But,
yes.
Back to the child support, it's like, it sucked because that money, is if she pays it for the electric bill and stuff, that's helping him live. But I mean, there were many times where I was asked to buy more things and I'm like, I'm doing $400 a month. Like, isn't that not enough? Right. I mean, I think that's enough. That's a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't cost me $400 to raise my kids a month.
No.
So that's just
unless you're sending them to some elite private school,
right? And then that's why should I get paid?
Exactly.
Why should I have to pay for that? I'm writing down the child support topic.
That's a good one. I feel like you got a lot there, and I have some to contribute. You could also put adoption subsidy in there.
Okay.
So anyway, so when I think about this issue, something that comes to mind is the mega church, like the type of pastors you see on TV. The ones that...
what's his name? Joe McHale. No, that's the talk soup guy. Joe...
I don't know.
Joe got the slick back hair. Ooh, I almost dropped an F. Keep going. I'm going to look him up.
All right. Well, the one that comes to my mind is Benny Hinn.
See, I don't even know who that is.
It's really interesting. So Benny Hinn had his start in smaller churches. Comes from a pastor's family, I believe. But at some point, he got connected with the TV ministries. And there's a lot of controversy and conspiracies that went on that I only know about because I grew up enmeshed in that culture. But suffice it to say, these TV broadcast networks, there would be pastors who would go on and essentially beg for money.
Yeah.
Support my ministry and God will do this for you. And it's like anything else. You put something, like you put a phishing attempt on the internet, somebody's going to click it and put their password in on accident.
Yep.
It's going to happen. Same thing with that. So a medium that was intended to reach people by entering their households was exploited. And these pastors found out that they could get into people's homes, and, some granny is probably going to hear it and be like, oh, bless his heart, he's working for Jesus, and write a check and send it in. And then there are those who promised that God would heal them if they wrote a check for X amount of dollars and sent it in. And meanwhile, these pastors are making a killing off of the American church, American viewers, whatever you want to call it, and they're not being taxed for a cent of it. And so you end up with these preachers flying around the country in these luxurious jets and all this stuff. And I look at that and I'm like, that is not okay. That's totally taking advantage of the system. But they're not doing anything illegal.
No. So I have a question. Do the pastors themselves get taxed on their checks?
Yes.
As American citizens, right?
Yes and no. And I can just dive into that right now since you asked.
Yeah.
For federal and state taxes, yes. They pay taxes like anybody else on their income. Now, when it comes to Social Security, pastors are actually required to pay twice the amount in.
Well, yeah, because you're a small business owner, right?
Yep, because you're self-employed in the eyes of the government if you're a pastor. So you pay twice as much. Now, you can exempt yourself from paying Social Security. There are very few ways to do that. One of them is be an ordained pastor and you can opt out of Social Security because of religious belief. So I actually did opt out.
Yeah, but if you opt out, you don't get Social Security,
yes.
Right? So it's
a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
For me, the main deciding factor was not the fact that I would have more money in my check. Where I was arriving in my thought process was, I don't feel it's the government's job to take care of me with this money that I'm earning from the church, like separation of church and state. I felt like they should be I thought it was very dicey to, have that coming in for my church work. So I just wasn't okay with it on a practical level. I have friends that opted out just because they wanted more money in their check. I get it. We were young pastors. It's kind of a stupid thing to do unless you're really serious about it. And I know for a fact that some of my friends that opted out, instead of setting that money aside in a savings account, they just took the extra money out of every check and spent it. And so now they've been working in ministry and they don't have that Social Security buffer that they would have if they had a secular job.
Yeah, that is something. Not that it's a ton of money, but if you don't invest well while you're opting out of that, yes, you're SOL when it comes to retirement time.
Yep. Thankfully, I had a plan that I paid into through payroll that the money that would have been directed for Social Security went into that account.
Oh,
so
you made some very smart moves at a young age for those, like very thoughtful of why you didn't want to pay Social Security, and then thoughtful enough to, unless someone advised you to put this money away. So
my dad definitely advised me. He's like, that's great that you can claim that exemption, but you need to do something with that money.
Right.
Now, truth be told, I cashed out that retirement plan and used it as a down payment for a house, but, you know.
At least you didn't blow it on strippers.
Because that's what pastors do.
I don't know. I just like to get a laugh out of you.
You're really good at it, too. So yes, that's part of my story. I opted out for very intentional reasons. So,
I want to go back to, you had so many good points about the mega church, and that's, yes. I try not to interrupt you because that's terrible, but I'm trying to think back at some of the thoughts I had. One of them was the taxes, or if the pastor has to pay taxes. But one of the things you said, I think it's crazy that those pastors actually say you're going to be healed if you give this. That to me seems a criminal offense.
But what law are you going to hinge that on?
There's not. I mean, there should be a douchebag law. Like,
seriously,
like this is douchey. You can't do these to the. But then they're like, oh, the government's saying, this is free will. They can, whatever. I don't know.
It's not like the pastors went into the homes and pickpocketed all these.
But the problem
people.
is if you promise something at a store, there are protections like the lemon law for cars.
Yes.
Like if you've promised certain things and they don't deliver, you could sue them and say, hey, you promised I would be healed. I'm not healed. Give me my $10 back or whatever it is. But,
it's very, very, very interesting.
But it is disgusting on those mega church. Going to our churches, and we may have talked about this before, you guys pass the plate, right?
Yes.
Like we don't.
I had to think about it. It's not like a big deal. It just happens.
Right. Well, I don't think it's a big deal. Well, no, there's not like a altar call to give.
Like we're going to pray. I guess we do pray as it's being passed, but I don't know. But we use like these nondescript white buckets.
Well, either way, it's a bucket you're passing. And I'm okay with that. But I thought it was interesting that Alive doesn't do that.
Growing up, it was like a big production. The deacons or elders or whatever
would walk down, grab the plates.
Yes, and it sound every week it would sound like elephants trotting down the center aisle because they would all walk in formation.
Yep,
and they would grab these big wooden plates, and it was like a military formation almost. Just how predictable it was. So.
I absolutely love that Alive doesn't do that. That's the one thing that turned me on to that church is like, wow, they're not begging. It doesn't get brought up at all.
Wow.
I mean, do we have giving sermons? Yes, of course. But it's more than just money. It's about giving in general, your time and those kind of things. But yeah, that's one thing that really excited me about that. So.
Hey there, it's Ben Crocker. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into this episode of the Threads podcast, Life Unfiltered. Did you know that recently Jason essentially dared me to start my own podcast? My wife didn't think it was a great idea at first, simply because I didn't have much time to work with. But, as you may have heard, I'm currently on medical leave from my job, and I need things to fill my time with. So, why not go ahead and start my very own podcast? I did just that, and you, my friend, are invited to listen to it and to become a fan of not only Threads podcast, A Life Unfiltered, but you are also invited to become a fan of The Root of All Ben podcast. It's a podcast all about the things that make me Ben. I talk about faith, family, relationships, vocation, basically all the things that just interest me. There's a lot of them, trust me. You're in for a treat. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Jason's listened and has given his approval to the first episode. My wife's a big fan. I've got some former students I used to work with out in the great state of Oregon that are tuning in. Everybody loves it so far. Maybe they're just lying to me, though. So you be the judge. If you'd like to tune in to this brand new podcast, all you need to do is search Spotify or Apple Podcasts for The Root of All Ben. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. Now let's get back to the other podcast, Threads, Life Unfiltered.
So let's get back into the tax thing. What you haven't really said what you feel like. Is it okay for them to get a tax? Like you asked me that, and then I'm sure we went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that?
I'm okay with it. I honestly think that, well, I'm okay with it, but then I'm not. So
oh, great.
I guess you could say I'm very torn on the issue. The majority of me, having worked for churches, is very okay with the fact that churches are given an exemption. The churches that I've worked with and been a part of growing up and am a part of now, they definitely are offering a social service. And in fact, the church I attend now, we are heavily involved in the Northview School District to the point where when a student died or a teacher, if one of them passes away, we are one of the first calls they make. Hey, can you send your pastors just to be in our building to talk with our kids? This crisis happened. we want to help them out. And that is exactly what a church should be doing.
Yeah.
So as long as that criteria is met and the church is actually functioning like the church should be, then I think absolutely they should be given an exemption because of the good that they're providing. However, like anything else, there are people that take it to the extreme. We talked about the megachurch pastors, and you asked if they were taxed. Well, the little caveat to that is, have you heard of the housing allowance for pastors?
Yeah, I thought that was just something the church provided. Is this a government thing?
It is a government thing.
So that's so weird.
Yeah, so basically what it comes down to is, let's say your salary as youth pastor is $40,000 per year. So in a normal job, you would be taxed on whatever was taxable of that $40,000. However, if you are a pastor, you can claim anything related to the upkeep of your home as a deduction. So how do these pastors do it? This is how. They can count their mortgage payment, they can count their rent, they can count their utilities, their internet, anything related to the upkeep of their home, they can count as their housing allowance, and that housing allowance decreases your taxable liability.
That's crap. I'm sorry. That's crap. Now I'm pissed.
Today it is crap. But back in the day, your typical pioneer pastor would have people from the church over to his house, and that's why it was invented. It was intended for that. But now, as Americans do, they've taken it to an excessive level. Yeah. And even if the home is not being used for ministry purposes, they can still claim that.
I can see claiming, and that kind of brings up a tax question for me, having all this in my basement. For our other podcast is actually a business, and can I claim some electricity, some, whatever? I think the mortgage payment, that one sucks. Mm-hmm. I think, okay, internet, whatever. I don't care about that. That's pennies. But when you're talking $1,000, $2,000 a month that you get to, if it's $1,000 a month, so that's $12,000 a year, you can deduct that from 40. So now
your taxable income has gone down to 28.
Yeah. And let's say it's 2,000, then it keeps just going down. So you're like paying almost no taxes anyways.
Yep. That's what happens with a lot of these mega church people, and that's why people get so upset with them. But some redeeming value to this story, I mentioned Benny Hinn by name only because recently he came out and apologized to the people he had essentially ripped off. He said, "I am sorry that I told you that you could earn God's favor by giving me your money. I was wrong. I'm sorry."
Well,
now, did he actually refund some of the gifts? I have no idea. Probably not. But he had the guts to go out and say, "I was wrong and I'm sorry."
And he's not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Well, you can't. That's great. That's great. So one of the things about, you keep going on these mega churches. So you talk about the pastor like taking advantage, but there's a team around that. So they're complicit in all that too.
Oh, absolutely.
And my question is, like, our church, all the the board and all that, that's all volunteer. In a mega church, are those guys getting paid too?
They shouldn't. be.
There's probably couple administrators.
Yeah.
Staff, like small staff, but like the board and like who's making decisions, because they're saying, yeah, let's keep doing it. So why are they, if they're not getting paid, what is their point of doing it?
The board is supposed to be made up of volunteers.
Okay. Is that like a law, or is that like a church law or state law, government law?
I think that's a federal law.
Okay.
If they do make any money, I know for certain, 100% certainty, nonprofits have to disclose that on their taxes.
That's true.
Do churches? I don't know. But if you ever wanted to know what a nonprofit executive director made, that is
public information.
You can find it on the web.
Yeah.
So, but not for churches. And that's another thing too that a lot of people have issue with, is the fact that there is no transparent reporting from churches like there is from nonprofit organizations. Like if I wanted to, I could go to Frederick Meyer Gardens, which is a nonprofit organization, and I could say, show me a copy of your 990. And by law, they're required to provide that to me. Now, if I was to go to a live church and say, show me a copy of your tax return, they don't have to. It's not required. It's like protected almost.
How is the benefits or how is the tax write-offs compared to like a nonprofit and church? Are they similar?
They're similar.
Okay. I'm sure there's some.
But there's just so much gray area in the church setting. So, and that's where I'm a fan of it, but there needs to be some better regulation. And I know that sounds odd coming from me who favors small government, but I feel like it's being taken advantage of in a way that it shouldn't be.
Well, you in that proponent thing you talk about the separation of church and state. Well, it sounds like the government's really involved in the church.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's kind of like we went back to the minimum wage that we talked about in a previous or future episode.
Whenever we decide to release that one.
The government, you want the government to stay out of it, but you also don't want them to be able to be sleazy about it too. So it's kind of like, what do you do here? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want the church. You presume a church is going to not be sleazy, but look at the mega churches that are like, I will heal you.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where to go with that. I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I would say that I'm fine with them getting a tax exempt. But then you get the question though, what about like the devil churches or whatever you call?
Funny that you bring that up because in this the website that we use for pulling these issues is procon.org. So you could go to churchesandtaxes.procon.org and read what I'm reading. But it says in spring 2010, the state of Oklahoma awarded tax exempt status to a Satanist group called the Church of Majesties. So, yeah.
What is the stipulation to get the tax exempt? See, this is the huge rabbit hole. Like, what do I have to do to proclaim, like,
you
I'm
have
a
to
church?
File with the IRS as a church.
And they just approve or disapprove on willy-nilly, or is there requirements?
There's forms that you have to fill out, and it's a whole process.
Yeah, but my point is, who decides what is the deciding?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that'd be interesting.
That would be.
Because I think if they've followed the exact rules, then they should get exempt. But because who am I to say that that's not the right religion? I mean, of course, I'm a Christian. I believe mine is the right religion, and I believe my God is, but I mean, there's tons of different opinions out there. But who am I to say that that's not the right opinion?
Yeah, and who are we to say that only the Christians should get this exemption?
Exactly.
So,
but there's got to be a line drawn
does
before you do it.
So here's an interesting stat with that housing allowance. It's actually called the parsonage exemption. If the parsonage exemption on religious ministers' housing costs were revoked, American clergy members would cumulatively lose an estimated $2.3 billion over 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's interesting because
are you doing for church? Are you a preacher for money?
Yeah.
Are you a preacher for help? Because if you're a preacher for help, then you shouldn't care about that.
Exactly. But here's the thing. I felt like if I was going to take advantage of that housing allowance, and this was something that my senior pastor encouraged me on as well. He said, if you're going to take advantage of that, then you better open up your home to church people. And so we did. We would have youth group events at our church. We bought things that we normally wouldn't have. Like we had folding chairs in the closet.
Yeah.
Various things like that. So I took advantage of the housing allowance, absolutely. But I did use my house as a place of ministry.
I'm going to tell you, honestly, if I was in that position, I would take every advantage I could.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's going to make my bottom line better, not that I'm greedy, but if this is legally allowed, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it makes your life a little bit easier, and you are doing God's work.
And God's work doesn't pay very much.
No, it doesn't.
If I think it would look very different if I was making what I make in sales, if I was making that in ministry. But I wasn't.
But
I really needed to take advantage of every opportunity.
But I think
could.
even if I was making that much, I would still take it. The government allows me to do this. I'm going to do it.
Sure.
I mean, you go get your taxes done. You want your accountant to pull every single.
That's true.
I mean, you don't want to pay any more taxes than you have to.
Speaking of which, you need to file the home office credit because this is totally that.
I can do that on my personal taxes? Oh, well, good.
Talk to your accountant about it because this is used predominantly for business.
Yeah, down here it is like literally everything.
Yeah, so you could get. Yeah, you need to talk to your tax.
I'll talk to Sam first. No, just kidding. So. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. I think if unless you got any more, we're trying to keep these around 30 minutes and just kind of
that already.
Yeah,
wow.
I know it goes by fast.
It does. Well, I do want to bring up one last thing in this vein of conversation. I don't feel like churches should have the ability to take part in political rallies, and that is against the law at this point.
Thank you for bringing that up.
So there is a law that states that if you go publicly behind the pulpit or in a video or anywhere, if a representative of your church states that First Baptist Church of Decatur, Illinois supports this candidate, you have just lost your nonprofit status by doing that.
Okay.
You are not to, approve any or endorse any candidate ever. And I know pastors that could do it just as individuals, but they're afraid to because they don't want it to be misconstrued as I'm supporting this person and therefore my church is too. So churches have lost their ability to be nonprofit, tax exempt because of this issue.
So what happens? Oh, so they still continue the church. They just don't get the tax bennies?
Exactly. So then, yeah, they have to pay taxes on their property and everything else, which causes a lot of churches
They don't have to
fold
pay property taxes either?
Gosh, no. You didn't know that?
No, I thought it just was the income they earned from...
There is no taxation of churches.
Wow.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, I agree on the political thing. Like, you should not be able... I mean, because that's not fair. Your church is the body of the congregation. Not everyone's going to agree with Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or whatever. So I think that's a good law.
Yeah. So that law was put into... it was passed in 1954. Since then, how many times do you think it's been broken?
10.
1.
Oh.
One time. And guess which candidate it was?
Donald Trump.
Nope. Bill Clinton.
Oh.
So the church at Pierce Creek in
Birmingham.
Nope. Binghamton.
Oh, that's a
New
weird
York.
Oh.
Which had placed an advertisement in USA Today and the Washington Times rebuking Bill Clinton 4 days before the 1992 presidential election.
What do you mean rebuking?
They came out against him, said, do not vote for President Bill Clinton.
Oh, you can't even do that either?
Apparently not.
I thought you just couldn't support
I guess support or rebuke you can't do.
And is that only because they're nonprofit?
Yes.
That's a little weird. Now I'm kind of like, you should...
Well, how about this? Let's take it... I don't want to drag this on too much more.
They don't have to be 30 minutes.
But something that's on the horizon now as gay marriage is legal in our country now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of churches. I would say the majority of Christianity on the books is not pro-gay marriage.
Yeah, and won't marry gay people.
Yeah, so there are some... there's some conversation happening at the top level government that if you refuse to marry these people, we can ixnay your tax benefits because you are infringing on their federal freedom.
Whoa.
That gets real dicey.
Yes, it does. Holy cow. Because then you're basically telling a minister to go against what he believes in just to get the tax. You can't do that. You can't do that because they're going to just do it because they don't want to lose the tax benefits for their church. I don't think that'll pass. I hope it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, there's talk of that, but again, take that with a grain of salt because it's a lot of the conservative factions that the doom and gloom people.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever get to that point.
That's so unfair.
It is.
That's so unfair. Because that's basically the state telling you how to believe in your own religion, or you do this.
Yep.
Ooh. Well, we'll end on that because I could get fired up about it.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. These episodes are actually a lot of fun. I just love sitting across the table and talking about issues that are important to people and important to us.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, an update on our lives. This is how I screwed up in the last week. It's more, how do you feel about this? I think it's been good.
Yeah, and we'll try to, if, again, we ask for suggestions, and we didn't get a ton, but hey, if you have one that you want us, what you think, what our opinion on, and Ben and I, a lot of times think different on stuff, but it's just a good conversation. Maybe these two that are coming out, we didn't get too heated, but it doesn't mean there won't be one that we will. I'm always looking for a fight. So you can check us out at threadspodcast.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to connect with you guys. And we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good whatever.